Punchline was powered by Telkom.
Extra data is always better with extra minutes. Dial *544# to subscribe and share Live Extra. Telkom, moving with you.
And welcome back to Punchline, powered by Telkom. In the ring tonight, #Mudavadi on Punchline. And we begin this second part of our sparring or brawling, which do you go for? Whatever is happening here tonight on the note of corruption. And very briefly, we would on some of these issues. The war on corruption as is now being carried out, you've seen, is mainly focusing, it appears, on prosecutions. Do you think that this is sufficient, or that there should be other actions necessary? For instance, the policy of keeping wealth declarations by public officials secret. Is that something that should be changed?
The war against corruption cannot be fought in a singular line. I do agree with you. The war on corruption must have a multi-faced approach. And indeed, one can admit that the issue about how declaration forms are filled and presented and they're not made public is perhaps a loophole that ought to be sealed. And I think you have a valid point there. Equally, we must then make sure that we have a good process at the audit level, we have a good process at the investigative level, at the prosecution level, and also we have a judiciary that is well resourced, so that all these agencies and others like the police and so forth can have a concerted effort in the fight against corruption. Then people must see things like the asset recovery being done more aggressively. They must also be able to have an opportunity to see more and more of public disclosure on the achievements that have been made in this area of corruption.
All right. On the 8th of May, this year, you were quoted calling for the independent forensic audit of the IFMIS system, saying, quote, if this system is turning out to be a siphon for stealing public funds, then it must be discontinued. And do you believe that is what IFMIS is by default or design?
That's the question. That's the question that one needs to look at. That's why there's the need for an independent audit, to review how well it has served us, how well it has served the county governments of this country, to say all public institutions. It is something that we need to have an opportunity to examine and interrogate, because a lot of resources continue to disappear. And the whole idea was that with that technology, with that system, with that software, there would be less loss of funds. But we are in a situation where the quantum of the funds that are disappearing are even bigger, in my view,
but you've been a man in government.
Than when they were manual.
And in local government, so in a sense you understand the issues with counties as well. Does this appear to you to be curious that it could just be a loophole in IFMIS, or is your knowledge of government through the years that there's something fundamentally wrong with how this system was set up, or maybe right, it's serving its purpose?
You know what goes into IFMIS is actually fed in by the human person. Now the question is, who has the passwords? Who has access to those passwords? Is it one person? Is it more than one person? So when I say that there is need for an independent audit of that system, it is a valid point. Kenyans need to have perhaps a mechanism where there is a reporting process that an independent audit has been done to show that these systems are working and they have not been interfered with.
Okay. Do you believe that ministers should be held, or cabinet secretaries, I should say, should be held accountable or take responsibility for what happens in their dockets relating to graft, even if they are not personally implicated?
It's a mixed bag, all right? It's a mixed bag because it depends on whether the minister was consulted or was not consulted. But at the end of the day, we are seeing that we are going into the future where the levels of integrity in this country, if we follow the Chapter 6 very, very carefully, it means that if there is any major loss that is so deliberate in a ministry, then it becomes difficult or perhaps untenable for the minister to continue sitting there.
Yeah, but in development countries, if developed, I should say, I beg your pardon, it's not just about a major loss. I mean, if a train derails, out goes the transport.
Yes, sometimes in India and in other parts of
is that the level of accountability you should be looking for?
Slowly we'll be getting there, I can tell you that. Going into the future, Kenya can get there. But at this point in time, I think it suffices to say that if, for instance, the Auditor General has brought out reports that indicate that there is massive pilferage, then...
Define massive. What is massive?
Massive is...
Is 100 million massive? Is
oh, yes,
it
is. But when I say quantum, the quantum, we are talking of losses that now appear even in billions in this country. But people don't budge.
Let me put it this way. You hope to run to be president. What would be the policy position of the Mudavadi administration?
Basically, it is zero tolerance to corruption.
So if a shilling is lost, you're out?
It's zero tolerance to corruption.
Would I be correct to phrase it that way?
Yeah, if a shilling is lost, fair, you're out. But remember what I was saying, that there's some issues, because once you're in government, there's some issues that are purely administrative errors, all right? But those are details that an auditor can fish out.
Okay, and do you believe that this political goodwill right now to have that sort of zero policy?
I think it's mounting. The political,
mounting.
Yes, the political goodwill is growing. Yeah, because before people were taking it for granted. We even had a situation where the youngsters would say, I don't mind corruption, and the survey was done. I'm quoting a survey here, done by the university, the Aga Khan University. They brought out something where the youth were saying they don't mind corruption as long as they're not caught. But lately, with the kind of action that is beginning to take shape in the country, I think the message is sinking. The hardships are beginning to get people to realize that corruption should not be tolerated.
So you've said it's mounting. How do you believe that there is then mounting political goodwill from both the president and the deputy president to fight corruption?
I can vouch for the president here, all right? He has spoken more aggressively about corruption and fighting corruption than his deputy. That's a fact. At the same time, we have seen a situation where that in the recent time, the Cabinet Secretary to Treasury and even the PS have had to exit.
Right.
All right. Now, this is a first in this country and indeed in many African countries, that somebody at that high level exits and appears in court to face charges.
So what are your thoughts on what you say is the, then less than luster approach from the deputy president in supporting that fight on corruption?
I think one has seen sometimes mixed signals. Mixed signals in the sense that you walk out there and you dismiss things when people question huge contributions that do not make sense from whatever resources you are having. And you say that these are people who don't want me to contribute to development. People are not saying don't contribute to development. People are simply saying explain a little more about the source of funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the 28th of May, you said we must begin calling thieves by their true name instead of deodorizing theft by calling it corruption. Why are persons associated with theft from public office still sitting in cabinet? You pondered, and on this program you have just said that a Mudavadi administration would have a 0 shilling tolerance policy. I may phrase it that way,
Yes.
to theft of public funds, that people would have to step aside. Yet you did not step aside from cabinet when you were implicated in the 2010 cemetery scandal as local government minister. Indeed, you went on to stay until 2012, 2 years later, after the scandal broke, while being investigated by the anti-graft agency at the time. Why is that?
Well, it happened at that time. But can I now also point out that the investigation went on, it was completed, the matters were handled even through the courts, and I was not involved.
But if this is your belief, your ethos, why was it not present
if that
then?
was then under a different kind of situation, the old constitutional arrangement. But here we are now. I'm talking about going forward, and I'm saying here, I have faced that, and I did face the investigation at that time. I did not shy away from facing that investigation. The investigative authorities found what they found, and those who are culpable were taken to court.
But that wasn't a question about the Constitution, because you do not have to rely on the Constitution to live up to your own personal standards on integrity. Why was the situation different
I think the situation now is that the situation, I was very clear, and my conscience was 100% clear, that the investigation should go on, and I had nothing to do with any malpractice.
But it's not about that. You were sitting in the cabinet at the time, arguably in a position where you could influence investigations by not stepping aside from that document.
No.
Why not? No. If you were so confident in the process, let me finish my question. If you were so confident in the process and what its outcome would be, why would you then not wait to be vindicated?
I have been vindicated.
At that time, why did you not step aside in 2010?
No, but the fact is, I've been vindicated. All right? It's a historical thing, but I have been vindicated. Now, you say that I should have not been in office. Let me tell you.
Zero tolerance policy.
Let me tell you, the bigger problem that I ever had was the allegations around Goldenberg. All right?
Right.
For 3 years, I was out of the system. In fact, 5 years. They were investigated. I was interrogated. I went through a commission of inquiry. The Bosiro Commission of Inquiry.
Right.
I was out of government, and I had no way I could influence anything. And I have never tried to influence any investigation.
Let's talk about Goldenberg, because you've gone there.
So what I'm trying to say is that this matter was dealt with. I've faced investigation, whether I'm in government or not in government.
I suppose that the principle is about stepping aside, and whether you truly believe what you have articulated on this program, that there should be a zero tolerance policy, and that is something you'd be able to do in your government.
Going forward.
Be that as it may.
I will do that.
We'll see if you'll have the opportunity.
Yes.
Right? It depends on whether you are able to form that government. But because you've talked about Goldenberg, it is the record of both the lawyers and journalists who reported on this scandal at the time, that while you did, and we do acknowledge eventually, stop certain processes that led to the what we call Goldenberg, the massive looting of public resources, that as finance minister you were equally quiet for a significant amount of time to allow more plunder to continue. Indeed, Paul Bwite went on to say at a presidential debate 2013 that you were part of that, quote, when you look at the figures that were defrauded when Saitoti was finance minister compared to my friend Mudavadi, more was during Mudavadi's time. About 75%, he says, was stolen while you were minister.
You know what? I would want to tell all these people, don't be lazy. Just go and read the report of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. All the hard facts are there. Have you read it?
Actually, I have. Let's talk about
No. Have you read it?
And that's what I want us to talk about.
Yeah, so
the answer is yes.
Yes. What did the Goldenberg report say?
Yeah, for instance, let's take a look at the different types of fraud that took.
What did it say? Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I'm coming to. For instance, they do cite Patni's Exchange Bank that was able to manipulate treasury bills in the market. And by the time of its stoppage, he ended up holding at least $132.9 million. According to the testimony of the CBK's Jacinta Motella to the Bosire Commission of Inquiry, the Pricewaterhouse report of the CBK in 1993, also the public record of journalists and others, this still managed to happen after you had been appointed.
Who commissioned the Pricewaterhouse report?
The central bank?
No, I did it. I was the minister. We ordered Pricewaterhouse to come in so that we can unravel this thing. Who closed the Exchange Bank?
You later. And I think this is the point that they're making.
You see, you have to close it after you have the evidence. And it was not just Exchange Bank. There are so many other banks.
You're right, about 4 banks.
Yes. So please go and look at the report properly.
Well, we have. Perhaps let me raise another matter that the same report brings up. The looting of the CBK to a tune of $530 million through check fraud or check kiting in 4 days between the 2nd and 6th of April. Again, this is from the Goldenberg Judicial Commission of Inquiry and testimony before it. How did this happen during this time once you had already been appointed?
If you say you have read the report...
Am I not quoting the report?
If you say you have read the report, it is there.
Explain to the public.
All that happened. You see, the public here have a public document which has been in existence for years, but for some reason people don't want to bring it out and look at the details that are in that report. So
these are the details we're talking about,
so through you, I would want to appeal that it may be very useful for a lot of people to go back to that report.
But we are talking about the details
now. Let me tell you, do you, for instance, let me assume that, do you understand what Goldenberg was all about?
Yes, I do.
What was it?
It was the massive theft of government funds through different sources by Goldenberg International, by Kamlesh Patni. And the question at this table, sir, is not my understanding of Goldenberg. Let me conclude.
No, I want to help you.
It's not my understanding of Goldenberg. It's about the fact that 2 years prior to your appointment to the finance office, various different reports had been brought out, be it the Auditor General's report, be it an expose by the Nation newspapers, be it perhaps the Treasury as well. Yet Kamlesh Patni, let me conclude, yet Kamlesh Patni was still able to, within those first few months when you were already in office, to still draw money from public coffers. Why wasn't it stopped immediately you came in?
Can I explain to you what it is? First
you
of all,
could answer my question.
First of all,
you could answer my question.
Yes, but you have taken some time bringing out your narrative. Can I bring out mine?
Yes, please do, but that's not my narrative. That's the report of the time.
Now, let me put it this way. Let me just put it this way. The whole issue about Goldenberg was a government policy instituted under the export compensation scheme long before I was Minister for Finance.
True. Which was manipulated by Kamlesh Patni?
So whoever was manipulating it, including those public officers that were there, when I came in and I understood what it was, I scrapped export compensation. I scrapped pre-shipment financing. I closed all the banks that were involved. I caused the audit report of public Pricewaterhouse to be brought out. And indeed, the Commission of Inquiry came in. Because that was a hydra of so many things. The Commission of Inquiry was a public undertaking, and for 3 years I was subjected to it, and the conclusion was that I saved the country.
Maybe in the spirit of explaining it to me, you could explain just this one final thing on the matter. It is the fact, based on various things that were brought out by Treasury officials themselves, who would continuously call out the dealings of Kamlesh Patni 2 years before your appointment. The report of newspapers who did their own exposés and other reports that there was clearly something questionable, there was clearly something shady that Kamlesh Patni was involved in. This was already known by the time that you were being appointed. Why was it not prudent? Let me finish. Why was it not prudent, perhaps, to say from the very onset, as your perhaps first or second act in public office, that we must stop all further payment to Kamlesh Patni until we understand what's going on. Because contrary to that, you actually ended up issuing a statement that really took the toll of the previous minister, Saitoti, that nothing seemed wrong.
Let me put it this way. If you go back, and this is why I keep on saying you may not have read the report.
That is simply not accurate, but make your point, sir.
Because in that report, it also says that certain payments were made by a treasury official.
True.
And those payments were designed to be hidden from the minister, not to know. It's in that report. Please take time, go and look at it.
Yet it appears that you were so implicated that even after this exoneration that you have talked about by the Bosire Commission, that Justice Aaron Ringera, the head of the anti-corruption KCC body, told Americans in 2009, much later, and according to leaked diplomatic cables, that he advised President Kibaki at the time against your appointment. You were appointed.
That was Ringera. He made his decision. Kibaki decided to appoint me. Do you think I'm the right person to answer that question?
I'm simply stating a matter of public record.
Do you think I'm the right one to answer that question?
I do, that's why I posed it to you. Would you say that you were not in the least bit negligent or bear any kind of responsibility for actions that took place in your docket, whether or not they were designed to be kept from you?
If somebody thought that I had done something wrong, it should have come out in the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. I was not in office. They had an opportunity to look at everything that my signature was on, and I was never there for that time that it was going on. So I was cleared by a Judicial Commission of Inquiry.
All right. And you know, as we conclude, you are believed to own various large assets, a bank, major stock in other banks, an insurance company, to own vast real estate. First of all, is that true? This is something that is often reported on. Is it true?
No, I think there's some exaggeration. I'm not saying
Which one don't you own?
I'm not saying that I'm poor. I don't own any bank, for instance.
Okay.
All right. I have some shares in an insurance firm. I don't deny that. Yeah.
So you have no part to, you have no shares in any bank, let's put it that way, without naming any bank. Okay.
No.
And you have also said, when we started our discussion on accountability of public officers, that you do believe that, you know, the source of their wealth or their wealth declaration should be made public. You, of course, right now, not in public office. Can you tell the nation, as a man who hopes to lead it, what is Musalia Mudavadi worth?
If I went there, first of all, let me clear that one. If I went there, I think there is merit in amending the law so that what somebody has can be declared. And it can be examined even publicly. All right?
Are you going to tell us what you're
all I can tell you is that I am fairly wealthy. All right? I'm not a poor person. Okay?
Is there a figure to that, fairly wealthy?
I can meet.
Is there a number?
I can meet my obligations, and I don't try to look at myself in the context of numbers.
And so you're that wealthy.
Yeah.
He's larger than numbers, is what you're saying.
I don't look at it in that context.
Okay, but do you believe that it would be an important step in the principle of openness and zero tolerance towards corruption for you to say on this program, because no law prohibits you also from saying what you're worth? Just laying it out there.
No, I think I've said it very clearly, that I don't quantify myself in terms of numbers.
You don't know what you're worth.
And I don't want to put anybody in a situation where they'll be saying, what is all this about? I think it is so clear.
Who would that person be?
No, this is speculative. Let me tell you, about declaring one's wealth, this is speculative. All I've said here is that I am not a poor man.
How is declaring your wealth speculative? Because it must be quantifiable.
That I will do within the legal framework, and I'm saying that there's merit in adjusting even the legal framework so that when such declarations are made,
It's-
whatever I declare will be made public.
Okay.
So let us cross the bridge
When we
at that
get there.
time.
All right, let's move on to the Constitution, if we may, and quite briefly. Do you believe that it is necessary to have a Constitution review before the 2022 election?
You see, this is, it's a very delicate debate. This is not a simple matter. I was involved a lot in the process of the build-up to the Constitution of 2010. Right? It's a very delicate matter. And I would want to appeal to Kenyans, really, at this point in time, not to take it as a simple matter where you're painting somebody either the reds or the blues in a very simplistic matter. There were issues within the Constitution of 2010 which we thought may need review as NASA, and we put them in our coalition agreement. And I still stand by what we put in our coalition agreement. All right?
Does it need to happen before 2022?
Now, that is subject to many other parameters. Okay? For instance, will the country have sufficient resources to go through a referendum before 2022? That's one issue. Two, we must ask ourselves, have we sorted out the referee?
The IEBC?
In the name of the IEBC, before we move to that level. And then the discourse, the public discourse that we must engage in terms of whether it is an initiative emanating from BBI or an initiative emanating from the Punguza Mizigo or others, like the governors are talking of introducing their own issues as well, under what they're calling Ugatuzi initiative. So these are Kenyans who are working within their constitutional framework to try and bring amendments. So,
but it's subject to various things.
They'll be subject to various.
You've talked about, for instance, sorting out the referee. What does that mean specifically?
The credibility of the IEBC remains the elephant in the room. Because following the elections of 2017, a lot of things remain unanswered. Even when the Supreme Court made a decision that the IEBC should actually allow access to its servers, they didn't do it in the way that they should have done it.
So how do you sort out the credibility
so that's the question.
Briefly, if you may, sir.
The political will is that let's relook at the IEBC, and Parliament has got the capacity to relook at IEBC.
And what specifically about IEBC would you be looking at? Is it how commissioners are appointed, for instance? Is it the period of time in which they supply materials to court when required?
There are so many things. I think the biggest challenge was around the integrity and the management of the electoral process. Okay, if we go back to what was highlighted during the petition, I think if we go around those areas, we shall be able to find a solution to the IEBC. And
because you have agreed that there should be some sort of review, what would your specific proposals be? What would ANC want to see at the table?
I think time is against us. But what I would say is that if we want to do any review, let us make sure that we are reviewing genuinely to improve accountability.
Okay.
For the people of Kenya.
How would you propose that is done?
It is in different stages. For instance, do we look at the question of whether Parliament should be a Parliament where cabinet secretaries are answerable to Parliament or not? So these are some of the issues we'd be looking at to enhance accountability. We would be looking at areas around this incessant battle that we are now seeing, for instance, where every time the national government is fighting with the county government about revenue sharing, what can we do constitutionally to make sure that this battle does not always recur to the extent that devolution is under threat? You know?
Right. So these are areas you believe should be examined, but perhaps you don't have a concrete proposal on them.
Because there are many different opinions. I have my ideas, but there could be a better one.
We'd like to hear your ideas since you're on the show.
But I've told you it's the time limit, okay? But for instance, I would do everything to enhance devolution. I would do everything to make sure that the revenue sharing arrangements between the national government is not subject to all these other whims that we are seeing, to the extent that county governments want to close. Let us be very clear. We would also want to look at institutions like the Auditor General. The Auditor General has just left office. And he is saying that there's a lacuna in the appointment of the Auditor General. This is a constitutional office. We will need to look at what was he saying. So these are some of the things that we need to look at.
All right, let's just take a look at debt as well, because you've been talking about that with a very concrete and specific proposal, so we could talk about that. In May 2019, I believe, you proposed the establishment of an independent public debt management authority, one that would regulate and manage our present debt and future borrowing, is what you said, that it must move us away from the present arrangement where borrowing is handled as if it is the function of a secret society. Those were your words. Yet,
Yes.
of course, you know Article 211 of the Constitution, and that it does give Parliament this job. So do you propose to take that away from Parliament? Do you believe Parliament has failed in that respect?
Yes, I think Parliament has not done us justice. And this is why I say that there are some things that we may need to review. Why was I proposing about the possibility of a semi-autonomous authority or an independent authority? We have examples in Ireland, we have others doing very well in Sweden and so forth, which are helping their country manage public debt and the engagements they go into. Now, when I saw the press release from the DPP's office about the Arwar and Kimorer dams, one of the things that he said is that some of those undertakings were not being reflected, or borrowings were not properly reflected in the consolidated fund. Now, that is the danger. The Eurobond, there were issues. It was borrowed, but it was not reflected. So we need to have an authority, an institution where there's proper transparency and disclosure in public borrowing.
And just very in one sentence, really, how do you plan to take this role away from Parliament? Is it what?
No. Parliament has to play its role. It is a legislative role because we have to amend the law, and Parliament must be persuaded to see the logic of amending the law, because even Parliament itself has not benefited from full disclosure from the executive on matters of debt.
So what, you would lobby Parliament to create this authority and take this role away from them?
Yes, and look at it clearly. The Parliament will still be there. Even that authority would still have to declare to the people of Kenya through Parliament about the debt portfolio in this country.
But it will be their primary work.
But we need to strengthen. We need to have experts in the debt management office or institution who can analyze and give proper advice on the risk that the country is taking.
Well, this administration, for instance, has said that it needs to borrow and to take that risk in order to put out the infrastructure that is necessary for Kenya to leapfrog years of underdevelopment. Do you believe that we do not need this scale of infrastructure now, or do you believe it is the financing of it that is wrong?
We will always need infrastructure to be improved, to be enhanced, so that more Kenyans can benefit and more parts of this country can be served appropriately. But the question that arises is at what cost? All right? So the message about debt is not, we're not saying don't borrow, but we are saying, for heaven's sake, if you borrow, are the terms that can be met by the people of Kenya? Because excessive debt translates into higher taxation.
We're trying to tax ourselves into wealth?
We may tax ourselves lame if we are not careful as a country. Because unless the economy is growing in leaps and bounds, but if we continue the way we are going to see a lot of distress.
But if you agree that this infrastructure is necessary and that even some borrowing is necessary, what would your proposal be in terms of... Let me finish. What would your proposal be, for instance, in how we can source the necessary funds for the kind of work that needs to be done?
The government needs to look more for concessionary funding than commercial. Right. In the last few years, the government has taken more of commercial debt than concessionary funding. And this is what is beginning to bite.
Finally, Honorable Mudavadi, that is your camera. What's your punchline?
I think the punchline here is that as they fight corruption, one needs to look at KRA also. And KRA also needs to understand that as much as the obligation is to raise taxes across the board, deal with evaders effectively, but at the same time, tax matters need to be handled carefully and professionally so that you are not crippling institutions in the process of the tax collection. You must have a measure of using your arbitration courts more effectively. Otherwise, you could also reach a situation where you scare away investors from this country, because the tax regime must be clearly understood, defined, so that people can know what they're doing.
My thanks to Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, the ANC party leader and possibly presidential candidate come 2022. And thank you to you as well for watching Punchline tonight. Another episode next Sunday, powered by Telkom. I'm Anne Kiguta. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.